everyone! I know that a few videos ago I said that I was intending to make my next witchcraft related video a video on how to cast spells, and I have filmed a majority of that video, but I think I underestimated how difficult it would be to film something like that. The actual filming of the casting of the spell is becoming difficult. One, because I kind of need someone else to help me, and two, because I needed some new supplies in order to cast the particular spell I wanted to cast in that video, and long story short, they haven't arrived yet still. So that video is coming, I promise, but I can't do anything about it right now, and I didn't want the entire witchcraft playlist on my channel to just die off waiting for this video to get finished. So I decided it might be a fun idea to do a video about how I found out that I was a witch, because unless you're a hereditary witch, which means that you were born into a family of witches already, chances are you didn't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be a witch now. Because unfortunately, even though we're in the year 2019 right now, there still haven't been as many advances as we need in terms of the way that witches and witchcraft are perceived by the general public for the most part. So most people are afraid to even be witches. I'm hoping that by hearing the story of how I discovered that I was a witch, if you're someone who is considering becoming a witch but you're a little bit afraid for whatever reason right now, it will help you kind of come to understand yourself better. I was born into an extremely Catholic family, and when I say extremely Catholic, I don't mean that just my mother or just my father was Catholic. I mean everybody was. On both sides of the family, I was completely surrounded. And they were very, very strict Catholics. These are people who said the rosary every night, who read their Bibles every night, who attended church every Sunday no matter how sick they were. These were people who were hardcore, and still are, about their beliefs. And before I get too far into it, I just want to let everybody know I have no issue with Catholicism or Christianity itself as a religion. I have no problem with people being Christian. I have plenty of friends who are, and as I just mentioned, my whole family is. I don't have an issue with it at all. What I have an issue with is when people make it such an enormous part of their lives that nothing else matters, and they kind of put people on the back burner because their religion is more important than those people. That's when I have a problem, or when it's used as a way of excusing their own bigotry. That's when I have an issue. So I just want you to know I don't have an issue with you if you are Catholic or some other variation of Christian. I'm just speaking from my own life experiences. So since I was born into this very strict Catholic family, of course, before I could even talk, they baptized me and decided that I was going to go to a very strict Catholic school. And this school, I ended up going to two different Catholic schools. The first one I was in, though, oh my goodness, was that intense. I was terrified of my teachers. Absolutely terrified. They would scream at me if I got something wrong. If I asked a question, a legitimate question about my religion, because something seemed contradictory, instead of just explaining it to me, I would get in trouble for asking that question, because you're not supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to just take it for what it is. I was in trouble a lot, and I couldn't understand why, because I was like, I'm not doing anything wrong here. And in my opinion, this school was not teaching Bible passages. It was not teaching the core concepts of the religion we were meant to be celebrating. It was brainwashing. From preschool on, everything was God this, God that, Jesus this, Jesus that. It was made to convince us that if we put one toe out of line, or if we asked any question, no, not allowed, we would have something terrible happen to us. And I don't mean something terrible would happen to us in school. The brainwashing was so severe in this school that they convinced us if we weren't just mindless, God-loving drones and we had any free thought outside the Bible, we were going to burn. From kindergarten to about 3rd grade, so I was like 9 or so at the oldest of this and about 5 at the youngest. From age 5 to 9, I was having night terrors every single night where I would ask a question about the religion, or I would say, well, I noticed this and I think that in this other passage they said this and it's contradicting. I would just basically bring up something valid, and one of my teachers would throw me down this flaming pit and I'd have to sit there and try to claw my way out of it while screaming from how much the fire was hurting me and trying to escape demons. That's how bad the brainwashing was. I was convinced as a small child that if I asked a question, that is what would happen to me. And the older I got, the more the brainwashing took hold, and for a little while in my life, I sadly became a God-loving drone. I didn't really believe any of it. I just did all of it because that's what I was supposed to do. And it was horrible because some of the values I had were so backwards and so terrible, and I had nowhere else to go because my family and the school I was in deliberately shielded me from other religions. Unless it was Judaism or Christianity, I didn't know it existed. I had no idea there were other religions in the world. And the few times the word witch popped up in conversation, it was treated as this horrible, unholy, demonic thing that made me absolutely terrified of it. Then when I was in 7th grade, the Catholic school I was in shut down, and my parents, who have a small business of their own, were going through kind of a recession and couldn't afford to keep us in Catholic school. They had no choice but to throw us into public school, and it was horrific. We were so sheltered from the school we'd been to before and from our parents, and we had no idea what the outside world was really like. That it was the most confusing, terrifying thing for us. And it didn't take me very long before I started realizing there was more to the world than the Bible. I made some new friends in this school, and they were of different religious backgrounds. One was atheist, one was agnostic, one was Wiccan, one was Muslim. Like, there was everything. And I had so many questions, and for once when I asked these questions, they just answered me. They helped me understand what I needed to understand instead of yelling at me and telling me something awful would happen to me if I asked another question like that. And it was so freeing knowing that I was allowed knowledge. I found out in 8th grade that this school I was in had an elective course on world religions, where for, I think, half a semester, you spent a little bit of time each week learning about various different religions and what their core belief system was, and I was fascinated. I took the class, I started learning more, and my mind was so open, my heart was open, and I started realizing that the things I'd been taught were completely wrong, that there was nothing wrong at all with being Christian or, Catholic specifically, but that the way they were going about it in my life was not right, that they shouldn't have been forcing me into it, that I should have been allowed to learn about other religions and decide for myself what I wanted to be. So by high school, I decided Christianity was no longer for me. I wasn't comfortable with it. I was becoming increasingly anxious when I was in a church setting where I was around a lot of other Christians, and my family didn't take well to it. I was basically forced to go to church no matter what was going on with me, and once I hit the age of 18, I basically said, well, I'm an adult now, I get to make my own decisions, you can't force me to do or not do anything, and I'm not comfortable with Christianity. I'm not. It's fine if you are, but I'm not. It's not for me. And I bought a deck of tarot cards because I wanted to start learning more about paganism and about witchcraft, and I bought a few crystals. That's literally all I had. All I had was one tarot deck, and I had some crystals. I didn't have a lot yet. And I had a little tin of dried flowers that I'd made for myself. My mother was not happy at all about the fact that I was embracing paganism and witchcraft a little bit more. And when I was away at a friend's house overnight, she took all of my stuff. I came back to my room to find that literally all that was left in it was a statue of Jesus, a Bible, 2 shirts, and a pair of jeans. Everything else I owned was gone, and I was told I would get it back when I stopped behaving like this and started straightening up. That didn't work on me, needless to say. I was like, you can take my stuff away, but you can't stop me from thinking it and feeling it. And that's something I think is so important. That's something I want all of you who are still in the broom closet to understand. They can reject you. They can reject your belief system. They can take away all of your witchy tools, but they cannot force you to stop believing. They can't go into your head and force you to stop thinking about it and feeling it in your heart. Remember, you always have that belief system no matter what they take from you. This religious schism with my mother lasted for quite some time, and even in my early 20s when I realized I'd never be able to drive or get a driver's license because of my seizures, my mother told me that the only way she would accept me not being Catholic anymore is if every single week I still went to some kind of religious building and worshipped. And I said, well, for the belief system that I'm a part of now, there isn't really a building. It's kind of solitary. And she was like, no, you have to go somewhere. So I would find like spiritualist churches and stuff, and she would, no, I will drive you to a Christian church. That's it. That's all she was willing to do. She didn't care what branch of Christianity, but it had to be Christian, otherwise she wasn't taking me. So even though I was starting to find covens and people around me who were like me, she refused to help me. And in the place I lived at that time, there wasn't public transportation. I couldn't just get on a bus and go. The only things available to me were taxis and a very, very rare Uber, and it would have cost between $70 and $80 one way to go to these places to believe as I wanted to believe. Around here is when I started getting really pushed away from the Christian faith and strongly pushed into witchcraft. I can't say for sure what about it first hooked me in. I think it's the freedom of it and the fact that witchcraft is whatever you want it to be, and there isn't as much structure to it. There's no big set of rules you have to follow or something bad happens to you. So that was already interesting to me. And then at one point, my whole family went off to Florida for a week-long trip, and I stayed up north because I just didn't feel like going. I needed a break. And at one point, this was so strange, I was lying in my bed completely by myself. I was really relaxed, but I wasn't meditating or anything. I was just kind of laying there staring at my ceiling, and all of a sudden I got this vision. I knew I was still in my bed, and I wasn't lucid dreaming because I've lucid dreamed before, and this is nothing like it. When I lucid dream, I'm still very aware that I'm asleep. With this, I was fully conscious for it. I was still in my bed, but what I could see through my eyes was the forest on my parents' property. I was standing in front of it, and something was calling me in. And I've always loved the woods behind my parents' property. I've loved it since I moved there when I was 6 years old. I would find any excuse possible to go into the woods and just sit there and be with the trees and everything. And I was being called in by something, and I followed it because even though it was this disembodied voice, it didn't feel dangerous at all. It felt welcoming. And as I ventured further into the woods, I came across the most gorgeous stag I've ever seen in my entire life. A stag being a buck, a male deer. It had really, really long antlers. It just went on forever. And it had these kind, beautiful green eyes, greener than the grass green eyes, emeralds. And everything about this beautiful stag made me feel like I was finally home. Everything about it felt so loving and so welcoming, and the strange thing about it is that even though I'd never seen this stag before in my life, it felt familiar, but not from this lifetime. I knew I'd never seen it while I've been alive. It felt familiar, like I've known it in a different world. And as I drew nearer to it, it morphed. It took on some slightly human traits. It still had the antlers. It still had some fur, but it also looked like a man, but nothing about it was scary, because I've been through some bad stuff with guys in the past, and for the most part, if a strange man was standing on my property, I wouldn't be too keen about it. But it felt like this fatherly, loving energy was coming from it, and I approached it, and I just embraced it, and it allowed me to, and it embraced me back. And at the time this happened, I'd been going through the worst point in my depression. I was on regular suicide watch. I had bandages all over my arms. It was just a very, very bad time in my life. And as he held me, he said very clearly, this was not in my brain, like I heard it in my ears, as though you were standing right next to me right now talking to me, a very soft male voice saying, everything will be fine now, you're going to be okay. And after that, I snapped back and saw that I was still in my room. I saw my ceiling again. He was just gone as quickly as he'd appeared. And I just sat there and I cried for a little bit because of how emotionally impactful it was to experience something like that. And even though I couldn't see anything anymore, I could still feel like the feeling of arms wrapped around me until I had completely calmed down. And that's the moment that I realized there was something out there waiting for me, that I wasn't the one finding witchcraft and paganism. Paganism and witchcraft was finding me and calling to me and inviting me to it. This got even weirder though. After that initial experience, I decided to just go online because I was bored, and out of nowhere, on the page that I was on, I can't remember what website I was on, but I saw like a pagan website, and I clicked on it, and when I clicked on it, there was an article that immediately came up about the horned god. It didn't go to the homepage of this website. I clicked the website and immediately took me to an article about the horned god. I had never in my life heard of him. I had no idea who the horned god is. Not a clue, never even seen a picture of him until that point. And I was like, oh man, that's exactly who I saw today. And right there, I just pledged my life to the fairy realm, to the forest, to the horned god, to paganism itself, and to witchcraft. Right then, I knew that Christianity had failed me. Christianity had left me behind and made me feel like everything that was wrong with me was evil. But the horned god and paganism and witchcraft embraced me and took me in after I'd been abandoned. And that was what I needed. And ever since that day, I have happily practiced paganism and witchcraft every day of my life. I have never been happier. My depression was pretty much cured soon after I came to that realization that I needed paganism and witchcraft in my life, and I've never looked back. I am so happy, and I hope that, again, if you are in the broom closet or if you're starting to consider becoming a witch or pagan or anything, that my stories inspired you to be true to yourself, because pretty much all of the problems I was facing in my life were diminished as soon as I realized I needed to be me. I needed to do what made me happy and stop worrying so much about whether or not I made everybody else happy. You deserve to have the freedom to believe whatever you want. As always, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anybody else thinks about it, and I will see all of you again very soon.